Okay, we're going to resume the meeting. Apparently we had the technical difficulties repaired. And we did do the Pledge of Allegiance, so Chair Fuentes did a phenomenal job at that. So we will do public comments, and as I had stated earlier, please make your comments to be 3 minutes. And do we have any public comments? Going once? Going twice?
Yes, we do have 2 public comments. Heiko Peschel.
And city staff. This is Heiko Peschel for Perel Avenue, Foothill Ranch. And I've got just a few things. I noticed it's been a good week for rehousing the homeless. Laguna Niguel first, and now Irvine are all up in arms about it. And I was thinking, and this is facetious of course, is that there's a nice open area just the other side over here that has a nursery on it that's going away. Maybe we could house them all there. And again, it was facetious. Anyway, back to the serious part. Continuation of Portola. Is there any way that the city can get together with the Chamber of Commerce? Because the Chamber of Commerce with the folks up in the Foothill area would really appreciate it if the people in Irvine came to visit our Target, our Walmart, and all the other stores up there, because their only other choice is going down into Irvine, and nobody likes to do that, especially those of us who live here. So if we can do something about putting Portola through into Irvine. It's not a long stretch. It's not a difficult stretch. My brother-in-law and his D9 could do most of it without too much problem. Anyway, so that's that. Street sweeping up in our area. I noticed that the council has finally done something, and they're working on doing some limited parking during street sweeping time. I'd like to see that continued. Foothill Ranch, for the most part, the street sweepers don't have much to do except go down the middle of the street because there are cars parked on either side. Last but not least, parking. At the last Parks and Recreation meeting, there was a group there from the Montberry area. The folks who live right behind the park there in Montberry, right off of El Toro, were complaining about the possibility of putting a dog run or a dog park into their favorite park. But their secondary comment was the street in front of the park never has any parking available because the barbers all have to park over there. They can't park in the parking lot because there isn't enough parking in the parking lot. And with that, I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I didn't have to state it this time, but at public comments, your name and your city of residence.
We have a second speaker, Herrenberg.
Good evening. I'm Ray Hartenberg, and I live in Lake Forest. And I tried to read through the data on traffic. The only reason I'm here is just because I wanted to put a voice to my concern about the intersection by Lake Forest and Overlake. I see people at that intersection struggling to make a left across 3 lanes of traffic that's sometimes going 60 miles an hour. I know I couldn't find any fatalities looking through the thing, but I drive by there and see, we're not a young group. I see people struggling with that turn and many near misses. So I just wanted to bring it up so there was somebody asking to look at it. That's my only point. That's all I've got. We don't drive out that way because it's so dangerous. But that left is somebody's going to die at that point. Hopefully not in my lifetime. But thank you.
Just a brief comment on that. We're working on what's called the Traffic Signal Master Plan study. That particular intersection is part of that study. It's going to go through the process to see whether or not a traffic signal is justified, but oftentimes we look for other things if traffic signals aren't justified, other ways to try and improve intersections that are part of the study. So we're still working on it. I have to get one more intersection done that I forgot to include at the last minute. So, but we're getting to a point, but that will include that intersection, and you're more than welcome to attend whichever commission is reviewing that, and we'd be happy to keep you in the loop on that if you'd like to.
Thank you. Any more Great. Any presentation items? Hearing none. Let's go with the consent calendar. So could we have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Let's vote.
Can I abstain?
Sure.
Thanks.
Just hit the button.
Oh, yeah, there's a button for that.
That's
I've
right.
done that before.
Doesn't have to do with brakes.
I thought it was your abs.
All right. Now we'll go on to the public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Armando. Our public hearing this evening is for Site Development Permit 0118-5117 to establish a required number of off-street parking spaces for Turning Point. Is Amanda Loffer.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a site development permit to establish the number of off-street parking spaces for Turning Point Treatment Center, a permitted medical office use located within an existing 1,500 square foot office space at 23331 El Toro Road, Suite 106. Turning Point Treatment Center provides group therapy and individual counseling for adults with substance abuse issues. The proposed tenant suite is currently divided into multiple offices that will be used for counseling sessions and business activities. Based on the definitions in the Lake Forest Municipal Code, the proposed business would be classified as a medical office and would be permitted in the professional and administrative zoning district. However, because the proposed establishment cannot meet the parking requirement for a general medical office of one parking space for every 150 square feet, a parking study was submitted to determine a specific parking requirement based on the unique operational characteristics of the business. As described in the staff report and parking study, there are 4 employees that will be working at this location at any given time. Employees will provide transportation to and from the facility for the 6 patrons by a company vehicle. The El Muirlands office building provides 1 parking space for every 250 square feet of leasable floor area. Based on the square footage of the proposed tenant suite, 6 spaces would be allotted to this tenant suite. As described in the parking study and based on the unique operational characteristics of the business, a maximum of 6 spaces would be required for Turning Point Recovery Center. The 6 spaces required for this use include 4 spaces for employees, 1 space for the company vehicle, and 1 space for the potential of a pre-approved patron who has been in the counseling treatment for a long period of time that would drive their personal vehicle to the facility. An additional condition of approval has been added to ensure that the number of vehicles associated with this facility does not exceed the 6 parking spaces that are allotted to the tenant suite. The proposed use is consistent with the allowable uses in the zoning code and is compatible with the surrounding office businesses. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of the site development permit, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and the applicant is also in the audience as well. Thank you.
Okay, no questions up here.
We do have a couple of speakers for this
Great.
item.
Okay.
Robert Carlson. And Tori Digroot.
Do we have any questions of the applicants? Maybe I have one. So, all of the customers, whatever, they'll arrive at clients. Thank you. By van.
Correct.
With the exception of if there's one person.
Sometimes people work and they actually come from work and they want to drive. It's very rare that we have, but we want to have that option available that is conditionally approved by the program director.
So if there has to be in a unique case where there are all 6, what won't be happening?
No.
Okay.
Only 1.
Okay.
It's rare. It doesn't happen that often.
Okay. Just for the record, state your name and...
Robert Carlson from Turning Point Treatment Center.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the presentations then we have. Do we, let's bring that back up here, and is there anything we need to discuss, or are we all good? All right. We have a motion then to close public comment?
Well, I will just say that I think the reason that we're not discussing this in any great intent, with any great detail, is because we've seen this before and it seems to be working for us. So, in another part of the city. So it's not that we're not interested in your project, and it's not that we haven't done our due diligence, but staff did a great job on the report, and I think it's just in line with exactly what we did. So with that, I will close the public hearing and make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Give you a second.
Okay, let's vote then. Oh, welcome to the city. Okay, and do we have any discussion items?
We do. Our discussion of our annual collision review, and we have a report from Dave Rogers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Obviously, you've had an opportunity to read and digest everything here, so I won't reiterate everything that's in the report. The annual collision review is just that. We look back on the previous calendar year for which we have a full year's worth of data and analyze that information to see if we can find any specific patterns or trends that might need mitigations to take place. This being the first year of this study after the Council approved funding for a database program that we're able to query and get this information from. We were able to use 2016 as our base year. It takes about 6 months to get the full year, so we weren't quite where we could use 2017, so we used 2016. We also included 2015 information for comparison so that you just didn't have one point of reference on here. This is something that honestly every city agency should do, and I'm glad we are headed down that path now and going forward. In general, the findings are that we have a relatively good collision history in terms of relatively minimal number of collisions by intersection. Our rates, which is a calculated number, is basically the number of collisions per million entering vehicles, which is another way to compare intersections, and actually takes into account volume, so you have kind of comparing them on the same basis. Both the total counts as well as the rates are well within what we call expected limits. What we don't expect is for collisions to never occur, because as we noted in the report, 94% are human error, and a lot of other things are beyond the control of the agency. So it's our job to design roads well, to mark them well, and to give guidance and information to drivers, but ultimately the primary responsibility is that of the drivers. As we noted in here, a couple of statistics. One that I think is important, a comparison to other cities. The Office of Traffic Safety, which is at the state level, compiles data on the numbers of injuries associated with collisions in various jurisdictions. In our report, we note that Lake Forest, in a comparison to similar-sized cities, has a relatively good standing within that comparison, which speaks again, I think, to things like congestion and roadway design and other things that contribute to that. So we are in good shape relative to that, and to our brethren here in South Orange County, we stand very similar to them throughout. The overall findings are that, again, collision patterns and trends are within expected limits. The only two exceptions that staff found in here as part of the initial review was at Lake Forest and Rockfield. As I noted on the individual collision report, I circled on there so you can see what I'm looking for when I start looking at these collision patterns and trends. That's page 1 of attachment 4. I kind of bubbled it out there. It starts to look like there might be a pattern or trend. And so what we need to do when we see something like that is delve a little bit deeper into that information to see if we can actually figure out if it is a true pattern or trend, or if there's something else that's going on in here. In this case, although there looks to be a series of similar collisions, the at-fault drivers are varied throughout here. So it isn't pointing to the same movement being at fault repetitively throughout this particular situation out here. So in terms of what we're looking for, 5 collisions caused by the same movement at the same location is kind of our starting point for what we consider a pattern or trend in a 12-month period. So in this case, again, we saw what appeared to be a pattern or trend. Once you delve deeper into it, it actually does not appear to be a pattern or trend. We did some comparison to both 2015 and some information from 2017, which shows this is a bit of an anomaly, a bubble. It happens sometimes in the world of traffic. You get little clusters of collisions. So overall, we did not find what we call a traditional pattern or trend, but I did find enough of a pattern that I felt it was worthwhile recommending a minor traffic signal timing adjustment. I don't know if it was common knowledge out there, but when a traffic signal is changing from one direction to a conflicting movement, we actually have a period of what we call all red. Everybody sees red for a short period of time. It's the equivalent of a short extension of the yellow clearance interval, but we don't want to keep extending our yellows because people start getting into a pattern, they get used to them. So by throwing this all red in there, we keep our yellows consistent, but we provide just an incremental amount of additional clearance time for vehicles to clear the intersection. Based on a lot of data and information that I've had, most red light running violations occur within about 0.2 seconds after the yellow ends. 0.2 to 0.5 is common, and these are typically errors in judgment. These are not individuals that are trying to purposely run a red for some reason. They just made that slight error in judgment. So these all red sequences or times of 1 second or slightly more capture most of those movements and, in my opinion, help to reduce some of these severe collisions that can occur in those environments. Typically, we have 1 second for every direction minimum. Some places we have up to 2 because of certain conditions, super wide intersections, things like that. In this case, for this particular left turn movement where we started to see a bit of a pattern, we are currently at the minimum of 1 second of all red. The recommendation before you tonight is to increase that to 1.5 seconds, which is kind of that middle between our minimum and maximum. Just again, to give a little bit of extra time to perhaps let, in this case, ironically, the left turners have that little extra time to kind of complete that particular left turn. So that's the recommendation on that one front. The other intersection, which did appear on the overall list but not in the top 16 of the list, but one that we knew we had something of a concern about, was at Live Oak and Santiago Canyon Road. There, because of, and I know this because we had work orders come through on a fairly frequent basis repairing a guardrail that we have in that area, that we were having a series of collisions out there where people were not stopping where Live Oak ends at Santiago Canyon Road and were running straight across the street into the guardrail on the far side. Yes, some of it may have been impaired. Some of it, I think, is just because people are driving on a canyon road and it's just curving and it's going, and they expect it to go on forever, and then all of a sudden it terminates there. And so we've had just people with just pure driver error out there too. If you've ever driven the road, the curvature as you approach Santiago it doesn't give you a clean line of sight of the stop sign continuously, so it kind of disappears behind a power pole here or there. And so even though it's not, again, not the true pattern or trend that we always look for, kind of the hard cutoff of 5 exact ones. We do think it's enough of a pattern or trend at that particular intersection to justify some additional driver warnings. In this case, a larger stop sign, some additional stop ahead signage, and a flashing red beacon, which would be the first installation of that type here in the city. But I think it's worthwhile in that somewhat remote, somewhat unusual condition that we have out there. So that is the other recommendation before you tonight. Just as a general information in that area, the County of Orange is soon to embark on a traffic safety improvement program for all of Live Oak from one end to the other. The city has been working with them on our little piece. We own literally like 300 feet of Live Oak. It's going to be a combination of striping. They're going to put in some high friction pavement surfaces to try and reduce people kind of skidding off the road. So that project is supposed to start this summer and to be followed probably within a year of Santiago Canyon from one end, literally one end to the other, from where it dead ends at Live Oak, which is the start of Santiago, up into and close to, I think, the, what's that toll road up there? It's the not the 133, it's the other one. 241. Not two, well, 261, thank you. The other toll road that intersects way up there for that entire length. Part of it is in just general response to some of the traffic conditions that have occurred out there. There were a series of fatal collisions over a relatively short period of time, a year or so ago. And so all of these projects are an attempt to improve driving conditions for all the canyon drivers that occur out there. So the city is coordinating with them. We own two segments of Santiago Canyon Road. One is about 1+ mile long. The other one is relatively short, again, just north of Santiago. So we are coordinating with them on that. So the recommendation tonight is a small step in that direction. The county will be working with us and taking additional steps for the entire length of those roadways. Again, a little bit unusual for what you considered yourself to be kind of a suburban community to have those types of roads. And so you do have, sometimes you have unique situations like that occur. Other than that, we also looked at the intersections that are part of the traffic signal master plan. The reason we included them here is because if they were considered important enough to be included in a special study, it probably is worth tracking them as we go through this, because this report is done annually. The traffic signal master plan, which is coming up, is only going to be once every 2 or 3 years. So this becomes an interim check at those locations that we thought were important enough to do that. As we noted in the report, there's nothing unusual purely on the traffic collision patterns out there, so there's nothing that we're recommending changes there. However, when the traffic signal master plan is completed, it looks at a broader degree or series of issues, gaps in traffic, total volume, sight distance, and other things that will be a much more robust study of the conditions at each of those intersections, and as a result, some recommendations may come out of that. So with that, I will turn it over to the Commission if you have any questions.
I got a couple of questions because I'm trying to understand stuff.
Sure.
And when you got the comparison data, okay, statistics are my thing, so you got it something over 105. What's 105 over 105, of course, being 1, would indicate the lowest. It's on page 3. I'm just trying to figure out where they're getting or how those are derived. What's the 105 base? And then what is the comparison factors that are being placed in relationship?
The 105, I'm using, I'm sorry, I don't.
Right.
That total number is the numbers of similar sized communities in the state of California.
Okay.
So we start with that.
Okay.
And then
that's the ranking that's
ranking
related within that 105.
Right. We are not being compared to an Anaheim. We are not being compared to a Aliso Viejo. Aliso Viejo is too small. They're in a different group. Anaheim is in another group. So the 105 is the cities of similar size in the state of California. The data is derived from all of the reports that come from the reporting agencies. And like I said, they use not total collisions, not the rate per million entering vehicles. They use the total number of injuries, which is an indicator of certain things, the severity of collisions and things like that. And many times it's more about a concern about injury, collisions, and fatalities as opposed to property damage also. So that's where it comes from. But I agree, it's kind of number one. Oops.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's the reverse.
Yeah, I was just curious what the 105 base was, and I saw 102 in the prior year, 101, and
Right.
it did not make any sense. But if it's a comparison of city to city, that makes sense, and that's logical to me. Okay. And then, when we're looking at intersection findings, and we got the 16 that are ranked, and I made an assumption, and it's apparently wrong. I was trying to figure if it was by volume or count, which establishes the rate. Because, for example, Lake Forest and Rockfield, you got 9 count and 16, 7 and 15, it gets a rate of 0.41. Okay, fine. But then you get down to number 14 and number 16, which have a higher rate, less number of collisions, and less volume of traffic. It didn't make any sense to me.
Correct, because it is a normalization across using volume.
You're just trying to bring them into balance
Correct.
one to the other?
Correct, because as you can see, and I'll just give you some of my history, you can have intersections that have 9 or 10 or 12 collisions, but this is the
So
example.
all the collisions are not comparable
Correct.
collisions, so you've got to
Right.
balance them
It's
out.
how many collisions per numbers of vehicles entering that intersection, and that's why the rate is always an important component in here, because total number of collisions doesn't potentially tell the whole story.
Right.
You could have an intersection that only has 3 collisions, but it might be a T intersection in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
That's an issue. That could potentially be an issue that would get overlooked, might not even be studied if it only had 3 collisions. So the rate is the way you balance and equalize every type of intersection, regardless of configuration and regardless of volume. It puts them on the same plane for.
Thank you. That answered the third question I had, which was another
Right.
0.76 deal, and that lets me know that it's a evaluation criteria. So, okay, that answers my questions.
Great. All of our traffic collisions in the city of Lake Forest are taken by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. We don't have any CP reports in this.
Correct. It just, the database that we get is everything that gets coded to Lake Forest, and so I had to through that because there are segments of the 5 freeway that by virtue of how the CHP sees them, they get coded to our city, and so I had to make sure that those reports don't skew our results in what we're trying to find here. And it only applies really when you get near the freeway, particularly like El Toro at the northbound off-ramp in Bridger. If you hit the button on that, it'll populate with 60 collisions, and that's because it's picking up all the collisions associated with the CHP. Okay. So I had to go back and manipulate it to make sure it only reflected what was actually on our street.
Okay, because that was my question.
So ends up in the database. We filter it out, so the ultimate reports only involve the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, and that was a question because when I work traffic, it's somebody else, look at the point of impact. And I think the Highway Patrol takes the on-ramps collisions, or they're coming, there's a certain deal, but be that as it may, we wouldn't get dinged for that, so to speak.
Correct. Like I said, I have to go through, and I'll give you an example. You're coming off the northbound ramp at El Toro. Our filter considered an intersection collision is within 200 feet or within 200 feet of the intersection. Even if it's on the ramp, if it's within 200 feet of the intersection, I consider that an intersection collision, and I include it. I don't just because it's Caltrans right away, right up to the edge of El Toro. I don't say no, it's not ours. So I have to normalize the sense here.
Okay. Then one other thing, I just wondered in your traffic talks or whatever, if you've these things with the driverless cars now. Mm-hmm. I know when I'm handling an accident, I want to find out who's and who the primary collision factor is, and then very, very rarely you would have one that says other than driver if that applied. But have there been any discussions in these meetings on how that would be handled at this point, or
I think there's a lot of ongoing discussions about what you do with driverless cars, the insurance companies and all the at-fault issues. I think that the era of driverless cars is further away than I think most people really want to believe. I
Right.
think it's tomorrow. I'm still waiting for my Jetson car, and I didn't get that, so I don't think we're going to get driverless cars in significant numbers for quite a while. I know. I think I missed the memo.
Curious if there was an action on that.
But yeah, not at this point.
Yeah.
I had one question. On streets like Big Parkway, which are kind of half Lake Forest and half Irvine, do we count any of the collisions in Big Parkway and streets like that where we butt up to the city of Irvine?
It is a little.
Yeah.
Those are a bit more difficult to manage sometimes. We don't have access to Irvine PD's database. Obviously, in the case of like Mission Viejo, it doesn't matter because the Orange County Sheriff's Department provides both. So it is a little tricky sometimes to try and get that data. I wasn't able to get all of that here, so it's a good point going forward is to try and gather some data from them to see if there's a few additional collisions. In my prior experience, if we own, and we own 3 legs of the intersection, you don't get a lot of collisions outside of that. And the most important, the ones that are most critical to understand, right angle and the kind of the ones that tend to result in higher severity or higher numbers of injuries, would be captured because we own the majority of those intersections. But it's a valid point. There is one leg left. Was there a rear ender or something like that that might have changed the dynamic a little bit? Certainly, potentially the number, probably not overall. Doing that in the future, and I appreciate that.
It's interesting and well explained. Thank you.
We have one speaker. Go Peschel.
Okay.
Michael Peschel, Foothill Avenue, Foothill Ranch, and yes, I agree with Dave on pretty much everything he had to say. I would like to make a couple comments in reference to that. Lake Forest and Rockfield is one of my favorite intersections because there's a nice restaurant there that I go to. Actually, there are several in the area that I go to. And I noticed that it's been continuous that the left turn as you're approaching the freeway is at the end of the light. The left turn as you come from the freeway is at the beginning of the light. And I'm not sure how it is on Rockfield. And I'm wondering if there's a difference, if there are more accidents coming from the side where the left turn is at the end or at the beginning. Because if the left turn's at the end, it means the traffic is still moving. If it's at the beginning, the traffic is just getting going. And that's just a question on my part. Doesn't need an answer here and now. The other part is Live Oak and Santiago Canyon. A story related to that. Before they opened up Portola, when Santa Margarita Parkway ended at El Toro, there were several instances of cars and trees. They'd just go through the intersection right into the trees right on the other side. And that is a definitely dead straight approach. I mean, it's not that you can't see the stop sign, or in that case, even the traffic light. You could see it, and they just ignored it and went right on through. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, then,
He's asking for something from us. We need to discuss it up here.
oh, okay, let's bring it up here and discuss this. Yes, thank you. I'll get this hang of this.
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I found something that's a little counterintuitive to me, and that was extending the yellow light. And I noticed there's a 5-second interval, and we're at almost to the point where if you're, and you take the red from the yellow as far as the timing. I heard you say, and I think I concur with you, is that the longer the yellow light there is, the more tendency is that the person's going to misjudge when they go through. It just seems to me, because I notice people speed up to try to make through the yellow, and if it's
Historical on that is that before all reds kind of became a thing, the natural tendency, if you had collisions, that you would extend the yellow. The problem is the vast majority of people that use roadways use them repeatedly,
Right.
and they start to think, hey, that's a little longer than it used to be, and then they just keep pushing the same envelope, and you're not gaining any ground in that. So when the all red came along, that's the way to get that extra clearance without causing the yellow to extend to an unreasonable period of time. And the yellows are set by the conditions out of the roadway. It's the approach speed and some other factors. So we have some minimums that we work against. Sometimes we give a little bit more for various reasons, but that's why the all red, I think, is the right way to approach these.
I agree, because I know most people, when they see the yellow light, try to make it through the yellow light. Have you found an experience that the shorter the yellow, the less incident you have in the intersection, because people aren't trying to blow through to the yellow to make it? It just seems as though traffic now is getting to the point that it turns yellow, and if there's two cars behind me, they're all trying to beat through that yellow light. And of course, my wife gives me a tremendous hard time because I never go through a yellow light. I'm always overly cautious. But my personal thinking is that the longer the yellow is, the more tendency is for a person to try to blow through the yellow to make it before the red.
Like I said, it's the amount of yellow is based on, and there are absolute minimums that you have to operate under. No yellow will ever be less than 3 seconds.
Okay.
Most of those are on the approach speeds, and so and again, sometimes we give a little bit more for that, but we try not to alter them to change or try to test driver behavior in the way you're describing, because the last thing I want to do is set up what we call a trap where it's changing, you're too far away, where's that point? You're trying to make sure that there's, when it does change, people are at a certain distance. For us as human beings, there's kind of that decision point you reach. We're trying to make sure when you reach that decision point, for the majority, flow can get you through there. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Okay. And I think my next question is to staff. There are a couple of recommendations. How are we to address those recommendations? Do we need to formulate a recommendation from the commission to take to council for approval? Is that correct? We're not approving these.
Correct. So the recommended action is to review and discuss the findings and conclusions of the study, which you've done, and then to make recommendations to the city council as appropriate. And as Dave Rogers has mentioned, the recommendations are to adjust the signal timing there at Lake Forest and Rockfield, to install a larger stop sign with higher intensity reflective sheeting at El Toro Santiago Canyon, Live Oak Canyon, and then on that intersection, installation of a solar-powered red flashing beacon on top of the stop sign post, and the installation of an additional stop-ahead sign adjacent to the stop-ahead legends. So those are staff's recommendations. If you want to recommend all of them to the City Council, you can do that, or if you want to pick those apart, you're welcome to do that too.
I had a question about the half-second increase in the red time, in the all-red time. Mm-hmm. How much of a effect does it have in an intersection based on your experience? It doesn't. A second's very long.
No, but when you realize the vast majority of the misjudging of an intersection, where you actually enter the intersection on the vast majority of them occur at about 0.2 seconds, and so within the zero, we're talking an increase now from 0 to 0.5, you capture a significant number of additional vehicles that are making that minor, drivers that are making that minor error in judgment. So you're right, it doesn't sound like much. It's only in that one direction. What could half a second mean? It actually can mean a lot in those moments in time where you're having someone just needing that little extra time to get through there before the opposing movement or a conflicting movement starts to move. So I agree. It doesn't sound like, even the full 1.5 seconds almost doesn't sound like a lot, but it can actually make a huge difference. Those tiny increments can make a big difference based on the statistical information that we have relative to when and how far into a red the vast majority of violations occur.
Well, I was wondering if there was a statistical basis for that, because it's an interesting time period.
Right.
So that's what I was wondering.
I'll give you my real quick story on that. Much of the data comes from companies trying to sell you red light cameras because they have a lot of data on that, and they like to tell you out the gate how much money you're going to make on these things, and then they hit you with these statistics and basically saying, literally, 80% of the people that run the red do so within the first 0.2 seconds, and they say each one of those is now money for you, and you're like, I don't like them, never would recommend them or anything like them. But interestingly enough, they're the ones that actually have a lot of really good data about this that we then use to do things like look at increasing slightly is not to make money, but make the intersection safer.
I think it's a really good idea. I think of all the things that you can do, that's probably one of the best ones, and it's very cost effective. It doesn't cost you anything. So I like that idea a lot. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think my experience has shown too, not only does by having the red longer in all directions, it eliminates makes it less. Somebody that's looking at the red, as soon as he hits the green, he goes. Now, if somebody that, as soon as they hit the green, he goes, if it's been red longer on the other side, the chances of that person clearing the intersection before the guy goes is greater. Is that kind of
correct? And I think most people have everybody pretty much does all reds now. So I think we get less of that as soon as it goes. As soon as the green or as soon as the yellow terminates, they go. I think even people in that aspect, or even though they're trying to move quicker out of it, that red is also still holding them back ever so slightly, and again creating an opportunity to have a few more vehicles clear that might make those mistakes.
Okay, I'd just like to see if we can get consensus for the staff recommendations.
I'd like to forward them all.
Yeah, me too.
I have seen no reason why not. I mean, they're all, council's going to make the determination to the cost effectiveness or how much each one of those is going to cost. But as far as items that should be recommended and put forward, I concur.
So do we need a motion for that? Or if that's a motion, I would second that.
But, do we have to close? No, we didn't have a public discussion. So
okay.
That would be my motion, that we forward all.
So do we need to close the public
recommendations
discussion?
There's no public hearing.
Okay, great.
For their consideration and approval.
Great, and I would second that. And thank you for those recommendations. So we'll go on now to city attorney comments.
No comment.
Thank you. And director comments?
I do have one comment this evening. This Saturday will be the city's Bunny Blast at El Toro Park from 11 to 3. And forgive me for the joke, but Gail hopes that you will hop on by. It's actually going to be our first public outreach event for our general plan. So we'll have a general plan tent, and we'll be asking people to help us understand what their vision for the community in 2040 is. So Gail and myself will be there, and we'd love to see you all there too.
Thank you. And any commissioners' comments?
I will be at Bunny Blast. You'll find me at the grill if you want us, so we're there to support that. I will not be able to make the second meeting if scheduled in April. I will be on vacation, hopefully fishing in Cabo. And other than that, have a great weekend.
I'd just like to thank Dave Rogers for all the information and all the hard work that you're doing. I can't believe the amount of detail you have in your reports and analysis. It's just, I'm very impressed with that. I think you're doing a really good job. I just wanted to let you know that. Amanda, as always, you've done a good job too.
I want to say ditto on that, Dave. It's your understanding of it and your explanations are really worthwhile.
Thank you.
So I just hope Amanda's parents were watching. And I would say that our new chairman's doing a great job too, so have a great week.
Thanks, slowly getting the hang of it. And thanks, Dave, for all the information on that. I appreciate that. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting of April 12th.